Hey guys, what's up? Nick here once again, and today we're going to be talking about Twisted Metal 3 and 4, and basically of why they're kind of underrated. I don't really know how to name this video. I'm curious what I'm going to put as my title, but essentially I'm just talking about, like, is it just me, or has there been like a huge resurgence of people coming out of the woodwork with a ton of gameplay and just content in general on YouTube of Twisted Metal 3 and 4? And how it was their favorite game in the series, and that, like, they didn't like the original two games in general. And honestly, I kind of have to agree with them in a lot of ways. So I know this is sacrilege to a lot of Twisted Metal fans, and I've definitely heard it time and time again from people saying, like, you know, if you don't like the first two games, you're not a real fan. If you think Twisted Metal 3 and 4 are good Twisted Metal games, you're an idiot. Like, you don't deserve to be called a fan of the series, blah, blah, blah. And to a degree, I understand what they're saying, and I get, you know, their reasons for that, because these two games were so drastically different. They were a lot different. And there's definitely issues with them, 100%. I'm not saying these games are amazing or they're perfect by any means. And there's definitely things in Twisted Metal 1 and 2 that I really liked. But there's also a lot of things I did not like, and I honestly think 99 Studios did a little bit better job. And we're going to get into that in this video. And as always, like to ask in the comment section below, let me know your guys' thoughts on this. If I'm wrong, let me know. If you agree, also, let me know. But with that, we're going to get into the main reasons why I feel these games were kind of underrated, and why I feel like a lot of people hate on them for not really a good reason. So the first reason is that I think a lot of people just hated these games off the bat because they weren't created by the same people that made the first two games. And don't get me wrong, like, I get that, you know, I understand brand loyalty, I understand supporting a company and not liking the new guy kind of thing. I definitely understand that. It'd be kind of like if, I don't know, let's say like a diehard franchise like Halo, right? You guys all know what happened when the old studio left Halo, Bungie. They sold it to, is it 434 Studio? I can't remember the one that, whatever owns Halo now, I can't remember their name. But I remember when they left and this other team took over with Halo, and everybody was super upset, and Bungie went on to make Destiny. And, you know, I can understand why people wouldn't want to play the new Halo, because it's not the same developers. So it's clearly going to be a different game. And this can pretty much be a 50-50 shot. It can be sometimes a better game than the original, and sometimes it can be a way worse game than the original. It's very rare if it's in the middle. But I want to say with Twisted Metal 3 and 4, I think they are that rare exception of kind of being in the middle. They're not necessarily better than the other games that were made by the original single track guys, but they're not necessarily worse either, at least in my opinion. Now, getting into the things that I think are better, for one, the visual style. I think the coding, like, in general, is so damn good with these games. They hold up to this day. Clearly, I'm using an emulator, though, and upscaling it in 4K, so this looks better than ever. But even playing like Twisted Metal 2 the other day, compared to this, this looks like a whole different console generation. It's crazy the amount of pop-in noticeable on the original games, and the texture quality for a lot of the characters and the environments. It just does not hold up at all today. Where I honestly can't say the same for these. I can't, like, Twisted Metal 3 and 4 look very good to this day. Like, the lighting effects, the shadows, the actual effects and like fire and explosions, stuff like that, like, just looks so much more detailed and just better in general. But of course, graphics aren't everything. They're not the only thing that when it comes to games. Gameplay is number one. And do they accomplish that? I think yes. Now, I think this is another reason why a lot of people hated on Twisted Metal 3 and 4. The gameplay is a lot slower. And now, I'm on the fence of this. In some ways I prefer it, in other ways I don't prefer it. I've talked about this before, where Twisted Metal Black, I think, is like the perfect middleman, where they definitely slowed down the actual gameplay compared to Twisted Metal 1 and 2, but they kept it fast enough to where you do feel like you have a good sense of speed, and it's still frantic gameplay. It's not so slow to the point where it feels like 3 and 4. And what I mean by slow gameplay is that the cars just don't feel like they're going over 40 miles an hour. They really don't. And that's even if you're choosing one of the fastest characters in the game. Like, the speedometer right now says I'm going 100 miles an hour. I'm sorry. Like, there's no way I'm going over 50. So that is definitely a big downside to these games, is the sense of speed. And just in general, when you're fighting people, it's just like, yeah, you have really tight controls. You turn on a dime just like in the originals and all that. But you just don't feel like you can get away very fast from people. And it just kind of feels like bumper carts half the time, you know, with how slow it is. So that by far, I think, is the main reason, other than just the brand loyalty, as to why people did not enjoy Twist Metal 3 and 4. And then I think the last thing was the creativity wasn't nearly as strong as opposed to the originals. So, of course, you know, you have to hand it to the first game for creating the series and creating most of the iconic characters we know in the series, including Sweet Tooth. Of course, super creative, very interesting backstories, and the overall plot of Calypso with the contests, and you name it. Now, when we moved to Twist Metal 2, they went above and beyond with the creativity. You got Axel, Mr. Slam, Twister. You got the world tour, so now you're bringing in a ton of real-world landmarks into the world with all the different maps and destructibility and the like rooftops of New York. You can fall to your death in Antarctica, you know, all that stuff, right? There was so much creativity in Twist Metal 2 that I think it just set it over. They had these expectations that were just so over the top that when Twist Metal 3 came out, I think a lot of people were super disappointed because, yeah, they had real-world landmarks, but the level design was just so lacking in Twist Metal 3, and the overall character designs and character creativity just was not there, to say the least. It just was horrible, and you guys know how bad the endings were and the characters were in that game, and rightfully so, it was bashed, right? So in terms of like characters and the storylines, yeah, you're never going to beat the original games. You're never going to beat Twist Metal 1, 2, and Black. Those are the best in terms of the story and the characters. But when it comes to the actual car designs and the gameplay, like the actual feel of the cars and the combat, I think 3 and 4 did an absolute killer job in making a car combat game. And David Jaffe actually said this himself, in the sense of, if these games came out and they weren't called Twisted Metal, if they were trying to be something different that was just in the car combat genre, like Vigilante 8 was, I don't think they would have been as successful. And granted, I probably would have never played them myself, but I think they would have had a much warmer reception and they would have been a lot better in the ratings department. It's just because they had to be compared to the original Twisted Metal 1 and 2, and they just didn't hold up in the terms of the creativity, the characters, and the storylines. And the sense of speed, of course. But everything else, I think they did better. In my personal opinion, I think everything else is better in these games than in the original 1 and 2. For instance, the biggest two issues I have with the first two games is, yes, you have a good sense of speed, but the control of your vehicles is just terrible. Like, I can't tell you how many times I'll be running around a corner, you barely touch it, and your car comes to a complete stop, and it takes like a huge chunk of your health just from touching a wall. Like, yeah, it's kind of realistic because a vehicle in real life, you're not going to be able to run into a wall like this and not take damage, but it's a video game, and it's not meant to be realistic. It's a fighting game in cars. So that was a big issue with mine in the original games. The other big issue was the AI. And don't get me wrong, the AI is definitely not perfect in Twist Metal 3 and 4 either, but it's improved. I think it's much better. So in the original two games, it was just non-stop freezing and special spam. What I mean by that is that the AI characters would only fight you, and they would essentially follow you, continue to freeze you over and over and over again, and then they would continue using only their special. That you would never see them use any other weapons, and I'm not even exaggerating. Especially for some reason, Sweet Tooth in Twist Metal 2. He would just spam his special over and over and over again until you die. And yeah, it's just really weird design choices. I don't know why they did it that way. Now, with these games, don't get me wrong, they still have a lot of special spam. They still will freeze you from time to time. But you might have even noticed there while I was talking about this, the Crusher is using other weapons. He's actually running away right now and looking for health. And they just seem more human. They seem a lot smarter than in Twist Metal 1 and 2. The other thing too is, just like in the original games, even in these games, the AI is programmed to pretty much only attack you. You'll never really see them attacking each other or going after each other, which is kind of a bummer. It takes you out of the experience a little bit, just because it's supposed to be a contest, you know, everybody's supposed to be going against everybody. But it really does feel like sometimes it's you versus 12 people, which is a big bummer that they never really worked that out. And I hope that if there is a new twist metal coming, they will fix that and, you know, make that feel a little more realistic if you don't want to play multiplayer. And another thing to bring up too is when you're talking about Twist Metal 3 and 4, they're pretty drastically different games. Not in the sense of their gameplay. I think their gameplay is relatively the same, except for in 4, you don't flip over nearly as easy. And if you do flip over, they automatically put you right back on your feet, which obviously makes no sense, realistic-wise, but it makes for a more cohesive experience, and it's way less annoying. And with that being said, though, Twist Metal 4 is such a different departure from Twist Metal 3 with its level design, I think its vehicle design, and its creativity with pretty much all new characters. So I gotta applaud them for, you know, taking a lot of criticism from the first game and going back to the drawing board and actually adding a ton of new stuff to a series that was kind of coming to an end in a way. Because at this point, it was kind of like, you know, Guitar Hero, right? When the oversaturation of the market of car combat games, it wasn't selling nearly as much by the time they came out with their 18th iteration. So with Twisted Metal, you know, by the 4th game, at that point, there was a ton of knockoffs, quote unquote, coming out of people trying to make their own Twisted Metals, and it just was oversaturating the market, and they weren't selling nearly as well. And this is why Twisted Metal 4 was the last game by 99 Studios, and would be the last Twisted Metal until Twisted Metal Black comes out on the next generation system. But with that being said, though, I can't give 99 Studios, you know, too much flack, because they had a ton of work on their hands, and they were forced to not only create a game in 6 months, but also completely release it. So they had like no QA testing to really make sure everything was working and perfect, and just, yeah, the whole 9 yards. Twisted Metal 3 was just pushed out there with no rhyme or reason, and you can really tell by some of the level designs and some of the characters just being straight up broken. And I've talked about that in previous videos, and I feel like Twisted Metal 4, surprisingly, feels a lot more complete. It feels a lot more like they actually had time to work on it, but I think, ironically, they had the same amount of development time. I think it was around 6 to 8 months. So maybe those extra 1 or 2 months really helped the process, and that's all they needed. But it's truly amazing they were able to create 2, again, of my favorite games as a kid in under a year. Like, that is just mind-boggling to me. They were able to do that. So 99 Studios, they had a lot on their back, and they got a lot of backlash. I just don't really think it's warranted. I don't think they deserve the hate. I truly don't. But that's pretty much it. I think I went over the main points I wanted to in this video. Let me know in the comment section below what your thoughts are. If you love these games as well, if you hated these games, let me know why. I really do want to hear people's thoughts and opinions on it, because it's always been a very fascinating topic to me, and I've always been curious as to why people love and or hate these games. So yeah, hope you guys have a wonderful day. Leave a like, share your support as always. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and we'll hopefully see you in the next one. Peace.